This was the tweet sent out last summer by the FDA that got a lot of people talking. You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it. This was the FDA's way of telling people to stop using ivermectin to treat COVID.
At the time, people were getting and taking the livestock version of the medication after hearing it might help. There was nationwide ridicule that struck a nerve with a handful of doctors, including one here in Central Florida.
He claims he's successfully treated about 3,000 COVID patients with the human version of ivermectin.
Watch 2's Meredith McDonough found out he's not the only one saying the FDA is ignoring what could be a lifesaver.
I said to her, if I'm going to lose my dad, I need to have the peace that I did everything I could do.
Mindy Lefevers Hodge is sharing her family's ordeal. Her father, David, was suffering from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He had just finished chemo, and Mindy says he was one of the first patients to receive the COVID vaccine in January of 2020. In March of 2021, David contracted COVID. While David was in the hospital, Mindy was advocating for ivermectin. She says a doctor prescribed ivermectin when she had COVID.
But literally after the first dose, I felt so much better.
So what is ivermectin?
It's actually considered a wonder drug. The person who made it actually got a Nobel Peace Prize for it in 2015.
According to Chest Journal, a peer-reviewed medical journal, ivermectin was developed in the late 1970s to treat parasitic infections. Originally, it was used in veterinary medicine, but was found to safely treat parasitic illnesses in humans, like scabies, worms, and river blindness. Chest Journal also reported 3.7 billion doses of ivermectin have been distributed globally over the past 30 years for humans. The World Health Organization names ivermectin on its essential medicines list. So for Mindy, her frustration only grew that her father was being denied ivermectin in a local hospital. Not until day 6, when he was being transferred to ICU, did a doctor agree to try ivermectin.
He should not have lived, and he was going downhill every single day until the ivermectin started and we started seeing improvement.
Dr. John Littell says Mindy's family story is far too familiar.
Hello, how are you? I know from my own experience that tens of thousands of Americans lost their lives because the medical profession refused to accept that there was effective early treatment.
A bold statement from a local doctor who says he's treated some 3,000 patients with ivermectin and has seen its positive results. Dr. Littell has been a family physician since 1990, practicing in Kissimmee and Ocala. Littell says that he's got a target on his back for being so outspoken about ivermectin, but feels it's the right thing to do for his patients.
I've already been suspended from one hospital and fined $500. The bottom line is hospitals are not allowing us to provide optimal care.
One of Dr. Littell's patients, Stacy Morales, a recently retired nurse, got COVID last summer. She decided against getting the vaccine for personal reasons. When her oxygen was low, she called Dr. Littell and was prescribed ivermectin instead of going to the hospital where she worked at the time.
Within 2 hours, I was starting to breathe better.
According to the FDA's website, it states, the FDA has not authorized or approved ivermectin for the treatment or prevention of COVID-19 in people or animals. Ivermectin has not been shown to be safe or effective for these indications. Emergency medicine physician Dr. Rajiv Bal explains the studies on ivermectin treating COVID-19 are just not sufficient enough.
There's a number of physicians out there who will prescribe ivermectin. However, the vast majority are not prescribing it at this time because of the strong anecdotal studies that show that this medication hasn't been efficacious. It may show in the future that this medication is efficacious. However, at this time, we just don't have that evidence.
Congressman Neil Dunn represents Florida's 2nd Congressional District and was the former chief of staff at Gulf Coast Hospital. He wrote an op-ed in the Sun Sentinel in October of 2021, noting several studies out of India, Mexico, and Argentina that found ivermectin was working when treating COVID-19.
There's in excess of 30 studies in the literature, 20 of them randomized controlled studies that prospective studies that show benefit with ivermectin. So to say that there's no evidence for this drug at this point is to willfully just be ignorant of the true literature.
Dunn says ivermectin has become political, and the patients are the ones suffering. He encourages healthcare professionals like Dr. Littell to share their experience with ivermectin.
We have a secret society of doctors anymore who really get it. It's time that they were able to come out of the closet and be real docs and be real advocates for their patients.
Meredith McDonough, West 2 News.
There have been dozens of lawsuits across the country, including here in Florida, involving families suing hospitals asking for ivermectin as an option for their loved ones.
Remember, Dr. Littell treated his patients with ivermectin for humans, and that can only be prescribed by a doctor. No doctors recommend anyone try to treat themselves with ivermectin meant for animals.
It's also important to point out that right now the National Institutes of Health is funding a trial to test the safety and effectiveness of ivermectin and other drugs on COVID-19.